We're recording.
Yep. Welcome, Anne, and welcome everyone. This is Blackbird Writers Presents, and today we're interviewing historical mystery author Louise Bannon. Welcome, Anne.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you. I've really enjoyed your latest book in your historical mystery series.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
The Death of the Chinese Field Hand.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Now, is this number 3 or 4?
It is number 3.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't have a copy because we had to redo it at the last minute. It got a little controversial accidentally, but yeah, it was. It was a difficult novel to write, period, because it involves a very difficult part of LA's history. On the night of October 24th, 1871, 18 Chinese men were lynched.
Oh.
And yeah, and so most of the story takes place in the aftermath of that, but with, two of my character, Maddie Wilcox's field hands getting strangled. And so it's like I said, because it was such a horrific event, even for that time, they didn't like the Chinese and they were still horrified,
Right.
It was a terrible, terrible thing. And so it was really tough to write about this. And but at the same time, it was a story I think needs telling because, we don't realize how bad things were once upon a time.
Right. We'll start with a little bit. Tell us about, this is old Los Angeles.
Right.
Right. And I know that in the book, you've included some street names that were actually there. And some of the characters might have been people that may have lived in that area at the time.
Yeah. I mean, certainly Mr. and Mrs. Glassell, at least, Mr. Glassell is a real person who has who did exist at the time. Mrs. Glassell is presumed to have existed. I don't know when and whether she was still married to him or not, because, people tended to drop like flies in the 19th century. So, but he was presumably married, or I have heard that he was married, and I don't know much about her. There are several characters that may have existed. Mr. and Mrs. Hewitt. I name people after streets, and because people name streets after people. So
right. Or in the areas that they live too. If they lived there, then it became their street, right?
Downey, the city of Downey, was named after the first California governor. And his wife actually makes an appearance in some of the earlier books. I think she just kind of makes a passing reference in this one. So, but yeah, there are a lot of people, some of whom were presumed to have lived, some of whom were actual people, and I'm blanking on who all they were, but they're real in my mind, no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. So tell us about your main character, Madeline Wilcox.
Yes, Madeline Franklin Wilcox. She is a physician. We call her a healing woman in the first book, Death of the Zanjero, because she gets outed as a fully trained medical doctor in the middle of it. So, but she is a physician. She's also a winemaker. Her husband brought her out in 1860, and then bought the vineyard, and then promptly did her the favor of dying. So she's a widow. She's very forthright, very full of herself. I'd probably hate her if I met her in real life, but she is a lot of fun to deal with. She's one of my favorite characters.
Oh, I decided I would really like her in real life.
I'm glad. I like her too.
Yeah.
But she does tend to be very much, I know what I'm doing, I'm right. That sometimes annoys me in the real world.
Yeah.
But she has this vineyard and winery, and that is her primary support because you didn't make much money as a doctor back then. So,
but she's also a skilled medical practitioner, and I love the details that you included about like the surgeries and the medicine that they used. And then you also say, because the story is told from sort of a future point of view, looking
Yeah.
back, that,
These
you
are her
know,
memoirs.
that, right, that there's things that she was using or doing that have changed over time. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, actually, that's kind of where I accidentally made a boo-boo. I had been looking for when the concept of sterile surgery, ever since I started researching this, looking and looking and looking to figure out when sterile surgery came to the United States. It was developed in 1867, 1868 by Joseph Lister based on the work Louis Pasteur had done discovering germs. I mean, this is really a fascinating story. And so Lister writes this article, and he kept changing his procedures and everything. So I was looking and looking and looking. Well, I finally found, I'm in the middle, towards the end of the actual first draft of Field Hands, I actually found a site that had all these antique medical journals. So that's where I was able to get a lot of it. And I suddenly realized there was one called the California Gazette, Medical Gazette, 1869. And one of the first articles in it is an article on bad air or malaria, which is the term that we use for the disease, but it was also a theory of how disease happened, bad air.
Yeah.
Okay. 5 articles in is Joseph Lister's article on sterile surgery. And I'm going, I was so mad because the first 2 books, she doesn't mention sterile surgery. She just mentions that she's got to be sanitized. Sanitation is of the utmost. And so I have had it out in the second book, Death of the City Marshal, which also is, by the way, based on a real event in LA history. Part of that involves her house burning down, along with all her journals. So I had it out. She had only her sister's letters to recreate those first 2 books. The other thing that also happened, and it was a godsend, is I had been developing a friendship all along with my Paula Bernstein, who is a retired OBGYN out of Cedars. Lovely, lovely woman. And Paula offered to be my medical consultant. She writes the Hannah Klein Mysteries, Kline, Paula Bernstein, fun series. And, you know, but she really helped, and she helped me with my surgery.
Nice.
And she was just, the fun thing is she had read Death of the Zanjero, was like, oh my God, just trying to imagine practicing medicine without imaging, without these drugs, without this. And she was just like, oh my God. And I'm going, yeah, that's the way it was. And here's my research. And, you know, and she's going, oh, wow. And so when I was able to say, oh, well, this was in this medical journal and this was in this medical journal, it just pumped up the medicine. The medical details. It's a mile high in Field Hands. It was really great.
Yeah. That's great. And it was really fun to read. It's not like too technical, obviously, or anything. And it keeps the story like really in the present with her.
Thank you.
So was there any other kinds of research? I mean, you've got the history and the medicine. What other types of research did you do for this particular book?
Well, there was the research on the event itself. Scott Zesch wrote a fabulous book called The Chinatown Wars that detailed what happened. And he was taking it from the court records that, unfortunately, I don't have access to. They're held at a place called the Huntington Library, and you have to be a professional to access it. So I was able to get that. I also did a lot of work reading the newspapers at the time. They're on microfilm at the local library, Los Angeles Public Library. And truth be told, I do have a little, shall we say, ace in the hole, or in my back pocket on anything I do with the old Los Angeles series, because my husband is the archivist for the city of Los Angeles.
Oh.
As in, I have access, well, anybody technically has access to all the city records. So I'm able to look at these things. And in fact, when I was doing Death of the City Marshal, I mean, I found the city council resolution praising the city marshal who died. which was kind of weird because the William Warren was a real hothead and a jerk. But I also found tax records for his wife and widows. So it's just, you never know what you're going to find out when you start researching this stuff. And it's all good. I mean, there's a character in both City Marshal and in Field Hands who I discovered just reading a little classified ad in one of the newspapers. And it ran for weeks in around the time that Marshall Warren died. So it was just, it's just, there's all sorts of fun things. I call it the research rabbit hole for a reason. I mean, I am down.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, that makes it fun. I thought you also said that you had a friend who was Chinese who helped you with some of the maybe dialect and the characters.
I have two
Chinese
friends,
characters.
actually. Yeah. One is Ginkgo Qingli, or Qingling Ginkgo, who definitely, she speaks Chinese. She is native, well, she's natively Chinese, and she actually helped design she designed the cover for Death of the Zan Hero, did an amazing job. And then the other, friend, I mean, Dr. V. Liu, who was well, hopefully still is my acupuncturist if we ever get out of this damn pandemic. She helped me a lot with the Chinese medicine because, believe it or not, a lot of the practices they were engaging in the 19th century, they're still doing. I had gone to a seminar about, the conversions of the herbal remedies that the Chinese used with the metallic substances that a lot of the American doctors use. And there were all these ads with Chinese men in the newspaper with Chinese men pressing on the pulses of their patients. And I was like in shock when Dr. V literally did the same thing to me on our intake. And I went, "You guys are still doing that?" And she's, "What? It's 5,000 years old, of course."
Yeah.
So she was very patient, explained a lot of this to me. And I kept asking her, how's this changed over the years? And I mean, and her partner, Elena Park, also like, well, what did they do when they didn't have heat lamps? Oh, they waved a candle over you, So, you never know where you're going to get your research from.
Yeah. So it sounds like, you like to write what you don't know rather than what you do know. I
like writing what I know, but I like learning it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does.
I mean, I do write what I know sometimes. I mean, I'm working on a couple of things right now. They're, I've got a techno thriller, sort of. I don't know how thrilling or technique it is, but it's about a bunch of geeks. And I know a fair amount about that world, but I don't know as much as I should. So I'm still working on it. And besides, I can't write too technically specific because it'll change in 2 weeks. So,
Oh yeah.
But so I like that. I like research. I just love it. It's fun.
Well, that's great. And it's been really great talking to you.
Well, thank you.
Want to hold up your book covers?
Oh yeah, please.
Behind you?
This is the first book. Whoops, there we are. This is the first book in the series. It's Death of the Zan Hero. That's pronounced Zan Hero. That is based on the water overseer in the city, and it's based on how they irrigated the ditches. And this is Death of the City Marshal. This is based on a real live incident. The first LAPD chief, William Warren, was called the city marshal at the time, was shot and killed by his own deputy in a dispute on the bounty over a hooker. Kid you not. Swear to God, that's it. And so that in Death of the Zonhero, I posit that he did not die of his bullet wounds, because you can't really have a whodunit if you know who done it. But that's where that one starts. And Death of the Zonhero, of course, is based on the water overseer and a totally corrupt and disgusting person who ends up in one of the zanjas, which is Spanish for ditch, and that's how they irrigated LA.
Wow. Well, it sounds fascinating. I know what I'm reading next.
Oh, thank you. You're so kind. You really are.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Come and visit us on blackbirdwriters.com, and you can have more conversation with Anne and with our other Blackbird writers. And be sure to pick up The Death of the Chinese Field Hand. It's going to be available on Amazon for sure, and you'll be able to find it.
Bookshop.org. It's ebooks available at smashwords.com, and pretty much Barnes & Noble, and pretty much any retailer you want. Google iBook, or the Apple Book thing. Mm-hmm. I spread wide.
That sounds great. So thanks so much for coming, and we'll see you guys all soon.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.